Just another minute, and then we'll get started. Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. It's 9:02. I think we've got most everyone in the webinar already. So hello and welcome to the overview of the annual report requirements for GAAP local governments. My name is Kaylee Paggio, and with me today is Christy Colville. We are both on the local government support team here at the State Auditor's Office. We're excited to be here today to provide you with an overview of the annual report requirements to help you get started on filing your report. Before we get started with the fun stuff, we do have a few housekeeping items to go over. This live webinar is being recorded so that we can publish it later on our training and workshops page. Usually that does take a few weeks to publish, but since this is our last live training, we should have the published version out by the end of the month. So keep checking that page if you want to refer back to it or watch it again.
Instead of being
just a reminder, this training is not eligible for CPE. We do have a few interactive exercises throughout the training just to help promote engagement and confirm knowledge of the learning objectives. These are not required, but can be helpful in getting those learning objectives to stick and putting all of that into practice in some real
I'm going to be really specific as to what I'm asking.
We also have some polling questions.
I'm asking for liberty.
Those are just short pop-up questions throughout the training.
That includes people that are in our government. That includes judges.
That includes engagement
holding people accountable that are not following the law.
Once the webinar ends, a survey will open in a separate web browser. It's just two questions. What is something you liked about today's training? And what is something that you think we can improve on for next time?
Judge Norma Rodriguez
we always appreciate you taking the time to provide feedback
so we can continue
producing quality training for local
mandate against my employer, who happened to be my son's
there are
father
just a few Zoom specific things to keep in mind during the training.
I fought for my wages.
We encourage you to ask questions during the training, and you can submit these
February
through the Q&A button on your Zoom webinar panel. The Q&A button, this should only be used for questions to us, the speakers, that you are wanting an answer to. So you don't need to use the Q&A for answers to the exercises or
that
polling
wasn't
questions.
The first protection order that he
please keep in mind that the scope of this training is the annual report. So if your question maybe is a more of a unique situation or requires research,
and our judges are allowing
help desk so that we can get a specialist
to take children away
answer or connect with you after
by
the webinar.
Abusing the processes.
There should also be a chat button on your Zoom webinar panel, and this is where you'll submit answers to the exercise questions. The polling questions will be a pop-up with answer options to select. We'll demonstrate how that works in just a moment. Please remember, again, questions to the speakers should be submitted through the Q&A and not the chat feature. We will not be monitoring the chat for questions. We try to kind of keep an eye out, but the chat is used to respond to the exercises and interact as the audience. So it can get busy in there and we might miss a question. And with that, one of the primary objectives of this training is connecting the annual report components to resources available in the BARS manual. To achieve this, we have developed a few exercises throughout the training. To participate in these, we recommend opening a separate web browser now and going to the GAAP BARS manual. This can be accessed from our homepage, sao.wa.gov, and then under the BARS and annual filing tab is where you'll see the GAAP BARS manual. I'll give everyone just a minute or two to get that set up, and you'll want to keep that open for the duration of the training if you want to participate in the exercises. All right, while you're getting to the BARS manual, we do have our first polling question, just so you can see how these will work. So I'm launching the polling question. This should be a pop-up on your screen. The question is, how many years have you filed the annual report? And these are meant to be fairly quick, so we usually leave them up for 30 to 45 seconds. So get your answers in. If you and then when you're done, just make sure to close it out. So give that a couple more seconds. All right, I'm going to end that and then share the results so that everyone can see how a majority of people responded. So we have a lot of first-time filers here today, which is great. This is a good introduction training to the annual report, and then pretty even across the board. So we have a lot of people who have been filing for a long time, and then a lot in that middle area. So thank you for participating in those. And this is our agenda for today's 2-hour training. First, we have an introduction to what the annual report is. Then we'll get into how to navigate the BARS manual. This will help set us up for exercises and practicing how to find guidance in the manual. We'll spend majority of time in preparing the annual report components. Then we'll wrap up our training with more training and resources that are available to help local governments during the filing process. I don't have it noted, but we will have a 10-minute break about halfway through. And also, I know in the last one, we finished about 15 minutes early. So just keep that in mind with timing. So let's get into why we're all here today. What is the annual report? The annual report is required for all local governments in the state of Washington, regardless of size or annual revenue. In the most basic definition, the annual report is a compilation of a government's financial activity and other supporting documents, including information about how the government operated for the reporting year. We at the State Auditor's Office developed W requires our office to collect the financial data from local governments and produce comparative statistics that are available to the public. And then for the purposes of today's training, We're going to be focusing on the annual report components that are listed here, which include Schedule 01, Schedule 9, 15, 16, and then just a brief overview of the financial statement package, which includes the MD&A, notes, and RSI. So these are the components we'll be focused on today and how to prepare them for the report. Now, keep in mind there are other annual report components that may be required based on your specific government type. Since these components only apply to a specific government type or just a limited group, and we are limited to 2 hours, we won't get into these in today's training. But we do have a section in the BARS manual that covers these components, who they apply to. These are generally driven by RCWs, so we encourage reviewing the instructions in the BARS manual. If you have the PDF of the slides, which can be found either in the chat or we sent an email out yesterday with those, all of the links are clickable, so you can quickly access those sections for that guidance. And we'll talk more about resources at the end of today's training. But a lot of these are web-based forms that are completed in the filing system. So make sure you check out the how to navigate the annual filing system training that's recorded and posted on our training and workshops page. So I will pass it off to Christy now for our next agenda item.
Thank you, Kaylee. Let's learn about navigating the BARS manual and BARS template page. Let's start with the reporting templates. To access the templates, you will go to the SAO website at sao.wa.gov. Select BARS and annual filing menu, and then go to the BARS reporting templates. This is a snippet of what the BARS reporting templates page looks like. You can find templates for all SAO annual report schedules here, and they are pre-formatted for easy upload to the annual filing system. When looking at the Schedule 01 templates, you'll find a template for all government types except cities, towns, and counties. The reason for this is because they utilize almost the entire chart of accounts in various fund types. After reviewing the available templates, you may notice there is no template for the notes to the schedule of expenditures of federal awards, also referred to as the CFA. We will talk more about how to prepare this component later on. The templates are formatted very simply and are really designed as tools to import data into the filing system. The most important thing to remember when using these templates is do not alter the basic format of them. This means do not delete or add any columns, headers, subtotals, etc. You only need to input your information where applicable and then upload it into the filing system. One of the primary focuses of today's training is connecting the use of the reporting templates to the BARS manual, because it's important to understand the instructions for preparing each template, and these instructions are found in the BARS manual. That is a good segue into navigating the BARS manual. To reach the BARS manual, we'll go to the same sao.wa.gov and BARS and annual filing menu. But this time we are going to the BARS GAAP manual. Before we start digging into the manual, let's do a quick overview of the 4 main sections of the BARS manual. They are chart of accounts, budgeting, accounting, and reporting. You can see 3 of the main sections, budgeting, accounting, and reporting, are the BAR from our BARS acronym. Once you've selected the BARS manual, this is the page you will see. This landing page gives you some background information on the BARS manual. You can also print the manual by clicking the button in the top right corner that says download this manual as PDF. I know some people like to have physical copies to write and highlight on, so that option is there for you. The navigation pane is on the left side of the page. You can see there are the 4 sections we mentioned a minute ago: chart of accounts, budgeting, accounting, reporting. In addition to those, we have the table of contents and alerts and changes. Let's take a look at each of those sections. Looking at the highlighted box in this section, you'll notice the table of contents. This has links for every bars page, and it's split into chapters. The chapters are the other areas shown: chart of accounts, budgeting, etc. The last one, alerts and changes, is where we'll publish changes made to the bars manual, and we'll talk more about each of these areas in more detail. First is the chart of accounts, where you'll find all relevant guidance on bars accounts. For this training, we'll primarily be focused on the bars account export page, where you can download the full chart of accounts for your government type and basis of accounting. More on this in the next few slides. Other things you can find here include guidance on the basic structure of a bars code, what the different categories of codes are, revenue sources, expenditure functions, etc. One last thing I want to point out is the object codes section. This is important to know where to find because these are needed for reporting expenditures. For GAAP governments that report proprietary activity, you can also find guidance on determining operating and non-operating revenues and expenses. And this includes a matrix that identifies the classifications as they are reflected in the filing system. Let's look closer at the bars account export page. This is where governments can download a list of all bars codes applicable to their specific government type and basis of accounting. We'll talk more about that in just a moment. Before we move on, in the second paragraph, you can see there is a fiscal year 2025 codes to funds matrix. This is a great resource for the governments that utilize multiple fund types, like our cities and counties. This matrix lists the bars codes and the fund type they are allowed in, which will come into play later. At the bottom, you'll see this set of options. I'm going to just walk you through what these different export options mean, and then we'll put this into practice later during an exercise. First, select your government type. If you're a city or town, you would select city and town. If you're a fire district, select fire protection district, and so on. For basis of accounting, you would all select GAAP. Now for the export type. You can choose whether you want Excel or PDF. The PDF version is nice because it's print ready. So if you like to print and handwrite notes, that might be your choice. The Excel version is nice because it's easy to filter and sort the codes. If you like to take electronic notes, the Excel version might be the one you pick because it's easy to add a column and put your notes in it. Both options are nice, so try them both out. Reporting level has 2 options: above and prescribed only. If you select PDF, you'll automatically get above and prescribed, even if you select the other option. But if you select Excel, you can choose either option. We recommend always choosing above and prescribed because that gives the category of the bars codes, so you can easily find codes related to public safety, our utilities, etc. After selecting all the export options, you click Download Bars Accounts. The image on the left is a snippet of the bars account export in PDF. and on the right is the Schedule 01 template. The BARS account export will include all available codes for your government type and basis of accounting, includes the definition of each code. This is helpful to use when preparing the Schedule 01 template because, as you can see, the template does not include the definitions of the codes, only the code titles. Now we're on to the budgeting chapter. This explains the budget process, requirements, and how to amend the budget. For today's training, this chapter will not be relevant. Now we're moving on to the accounting chapter in the BARS manual. This is the best place to start if you're ever thinking, how do I record this transaction? Because having the correct accounting for your transactions helps to ensure that your annual report is accurate when you report to SAO. Some highlights to remember for this section include accounting guidance on how to account for liabilities, such as compensated absences, pension liabilities, etc. Also, an area we get a lot of questions on is how to account for interfund activities, such as interfund transfers, interfund loans, reimbursements, netting, etc. The reporting section is where you'll find guidance on how to report your accounting and financial activity to SAO as part of the annual report, including instructions on how to prepare the different components. Some key things to remember in the reporting chapter include reporting principles and requirements, which includes an overview of the annual reporting requirements based on your government type. This will give you a general idea of the components required for the annual report, but each component may have specific criteria that you'll need to evaluate to determine if it applies to your government or not. Then the supplementary and other information and SAO annual report schedule sections will include instructions on how to prepare each component of the annual report, such as the Schedule 01, 09, etc. This is just the guidance for how to report the information and fill out the templates. We'll be spending more time in this section as we go since we're focusing on the reporting instructions. That takes us to alerts and changes. Every year, we review the BARS manual and make changes to clarify existing guidance or add new guidance. The alerts and changes section gives a detailed description of what changed. The manual retains alerts and changes for the past 5 years. We sometimes issue what we call a BARS alert, and these are updates done mid-year that are hot topics, and we want to get the guidance out to local governments right away. These are sent out via email. I highly recommend you review this page every year so that you know what changes were made. I'll pass it off to Kaylee to get us started with our first exercise of the day.
Thank you. Just real quick before we get into the exercise, I want to briefly talk about the search function within the BARS manual. When you're in the manual, you should see a search bar towards the top that says "Init Search BARS GAAP." This is where you will search for all BARS related topics. If you aren't able to, like if you're new to the manual, sometimes searching is easier to try to figure out where the guidance you're looking for is. So with that, our first exercise is practicing how to use the BARS manual search function. As I mentioned at the beginning of this training, to participate in these exercises, you'll want to have the BARS manual open in a separate web browser. If you haven't done that already, or maybe you accidentally closed it, go ahead and navigate to the manual now. So these are just instructions on how to get back there. Once you are in the GAAP manual, you're going to type in the term drainage into the BARS search function. and then click search. So I'll give everyone a minute or two to get there and search for the term. Okay, and then once you search for the term drainage in the search results, you should see bars code 53100 listed for storm drainage utilities. Now, when using the search function to find bars codes, it's really important that you have a solid understanding of your government's allowable codes. So in this case, how can you confirm that this code is valid for your specific government type? Go ahead and put your answer into the chat on what you think you can do, or how can you confirm that this code is valid. And then just a reminder to use the chat to respond with exercise answers. So I see some good options. So in this case, our first recommendation would be to download your government's chart of accounts to confirm that it is listed there. So I saw a couple of responses that said, check my Schedule 01 template. And that is a great option as well for those special purpose districts. And so that will, so yes, if it's on your template, definitely allowable. But to get the full list of codes available for your government type and basis of accounting, we would recommend downloading the chart of accounts. I also saw someone mention would the codes to funds resource be useful in this situation? So in this case, it wouldn't. The codes to funds, and we'll show what that resource looks like in a little bit. But that one focuses more on the fund types that codes are allowed in and basis of accounting, but it doesn't identify the different government types. So that one would be not useful just in this specific situation. And before we move on, I did want to let you all know about a new training that is available on our training and workshops page under the e-learnings library. It's called Building Blocks of Bars Codes. And if you are new to bars, or maybe just even want a refresher, this is a great training on the basic structure of a bars code, the different categories of revenues and functions of expenditures, and just how those codes are built, what the different digits mean, and so on. So this is where that can be watched. All right, I don't see any outstanding questions in the Q&A. So we will go ahead and move on. If you do have questions, just a reminder to submit those through the Q&A. So now we're going to get into preparing the annual report components. So hopefully everyone has had coffee, that they're ready to go. This is where we'll be spending the majority of the rest of our time in this training. So let's get into it. First component we're talking about is the Schedule 01. Other than the preparation of your actual financial statement package, the Schedule 01 is the biggest component of the report, and it is required for all local governments. The purpose of this schedule is to report the government's financial activity for the reporting year. This includes beginning balance, revenues, expenditures, and ending balances for all reportable funds. This financial activity is reported using BARS accounts to identify the specific type of function or activity the transaction is supporting or the source of the revenue. Each reported fund is required to balance within $1,000 in order to submit the report. But luckily, once you're at that step in the filing system of uploading the Schedule 01, it will notify you if any funds are out of balance by more than $1,000. We have created Schedule 01 templates for all local government types except for cities, towns, and counties. As Christy mentioned earlier, that is because they utilize the entire chart of accounts and have a more complex reporting. So there just isn't a way to create a template for them. And for GAAP governments, it's basically a crosswalk from your financial statements into the Schedule 01, but utilizing the prescribed BARS codes. It also includes a summary of your balance sheet transactions. So this is your assets, liabilities, deferred inflows, and outflows. One of the most important ways that we utilize the Schedule 01 is we publish this data on our external website. So it is available for the public. Anyone can view this. Our office strives to be transparent, and this is one way we achieve that mission. So it's important that the data we collect is accurate. SAO is actually required by state law to produce and publish comparative statistics for all local governments. And in order to do that, we utilize the Schedule 01 data because the use of BARS codes helps make that data we collect uniform and easily comparable across all government types. We publish the data on our website via the financial intelligence tool, also referred to as FIT. So let's define what balance sheet accounts are and what they're used for. Within each local government's chart of accounts, you'll find a series of 800 codes, which are referred to as the balance sheet accounts and are used to report information from the balance sheet or statement of net position, such as current and non-current assets, deferred inflows and outflows, current and non-current liabilities. These codes are applicable to all GAAP funds except fiduciary. It's important to note that you must use the balance sheet and or statement of net position from the GAAP proprietary and governmental fund financial statements and not the government-wide statements, or you'll run into a balancing issue. Now let's talk about memorandum accounts, which are only applicable to GAAP proprietary funds. These accounts are used to report financial activity related to debt and capital assets, which are not reported in the operating statement, but still provide valuable information. The collection of this data is necessary for producing comparative statistics, which, as I mentioned earlier, the state auditor's office is required to do based on state law. So essentially, these memorandum accounts are used for informational purposes only and provide valuable financial data that we would not be able to collect otherwise. Since these accounts are for informational purposes only, amounts reported to them do not impact the balancing requirement of the Schedule 01. So let's look at the memorandum accounts for debt-related activities a little more closely. When debt is issued in a GAAP proprietary fund, no revenue or inflow is recorded on this statement of revenues, expenses, and changes in net position. Historically, since this activity is not required on the operating statement, it would have been omitted from the Schedule 01 to avoid balancing issues, and that prevented submission of the report. Without the use of these memorandum accounts, It would appear, though, as GAAP proprietary funds never issued any debt. And that really skews the comparative statistics because that would just not paint an accurate picture. Now, with the use of memorandum accounts, we can remain transparent to our constituents and see the accurate amount of debt issued across all local governments. And just like when debt is issued, when debt is paid or capital assets are purchased in a GAAP proprietary fund, no expense or outflow is recorded on the statement of revenues, expenses, and changes in net position. The use of these memorandum accounts report the amount paid on debt and capital related payments and are collected for informational purposes only. Just that allows us to meet that requirement for producing comparative statistics. As you can see, these memorandum accounts are the same ones you use to report these activities in governmental funds. However, the difference is when they are reported in a GAAP proprietary fund, the annual filing system automatically knows to omit those amounts from the system balancing check. And if you need to, we do have a short 5-minute recorded training available just on this topic. So you can watch that there. It's available on our training and workshops page. Also, as part of the 2025, the most recent BARS update, we do have a new section under charts of accounts in the BARS manual that is dedicated to memorandum accounts and balance sheet accounts. So you can also find that same information there. And when preparing the Schedule 1, it's important to have it in the correct format to avoid issues when uploading into the filing system. We don't want you getting a headache trying to get it to import into the system. If using our template, it will already be pre-formatted. So the intent is for you to only input the amounts where applicable and not alter any of the basic formatting. So that means no additional headers, subtotals, totals, comments, deleting columns, etc. And that really applies to all reporting templates. So what you'll do is you will just input the amounts where applicable or required, and then you can delete any rows that don't apply. Make sure that you actually delete them, not just hide them. Or you can put 0 into the amount fields, and the system will automatically remove those rows for you when you upload it into the filing system. So this is just an example of the basic format. You can see columns A through E are formatted as text, and then column F is formatted as number. So that is the format criteria that is already done in the templates. But if your accounting software generates one for you or you create your own, just know that this is the format requirements it should be in. All right, we have one exercise for the Schedule 1. And again, I know this is redundant, but to participate, you'll want to have the GAAP BARS manual open in a separate window. We just include reminders on how to get there, especially for those new people, that this can be a little overwhelming trying to navigate the BARS manual and connect it to everything we're doing in this training. So I'll just give everyone a minute, get into the GAAP BARS manual, and then once you're in there, go to the chart of accounts chapter off to the right, expand that and click on BARS account export. So give everyone just a minute or so. And once you're there, this is just the next step, is you're going to download the chart of accounts. So scroll down to the bottom and you're going to download the chart of accounts for a GAAP county. So you'll select county in the drop down for government type. and then select GAAP in the drop-down for basis of accounting. Leave everything else as the default options, and then click download BARS accounts, and just leave that document open for the next portion. But I'll give everyone just another minute to get that open and downloaded. All right, hopefully you have that open. So for our exercise scenario, Sample County is using BARS code 38930 in their 001 general fund and receiving an error when uploading the Schedule 01 into the filing system. In the chart of accounts that you just downloaded, find BARS code 38930, read the description. After reading that, why do you think the county is receiving an error for the BARS code that they're using? And go ahead and put your answer into the chat. All right, I've seen lots of good, accurate responses. So yes, you are all correct. When reading the description, you'll notice that it says specifically that it is only allowed in fiduciary funds. So the fact that the county was using it in their general fund is the reason that they received an error for that BARS code. So you can see this is just a snippet of what you're looking at in that chart of accounts. So this can be beneficial with when you're uploading your Schedule 1. If there are errors, making sure the code is one, allowable, but are there any restrictions based on the fund? And this is just a resource on how you can identify that. So thank you everyone for participating. And that brings us to our next polling question. So what resource in the BARS manual could be helpful in this situation that we just talked about with the BARS account 38930? Give that polling question just a couple more seconds. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and end that, share the results. So this one, I wish I could have just set up the question of like, okay, how many of these options would work? So in this case, you could either download the chart of accounts, just like we did as part of that exercise, but the codes to funds resource would actually also be helpful in this situation. just because that also will identify what fund types each code is allowed in. And we usually recommend using that in conjunction with the chart of accounts, mainly because you want to make sure first it's allowable for your government type, and then seeing if there's any special rules in the actual description of the code. And then the codes to fund will identify which fund type that code is allowed in. So let's just quickly recap the exercise we just did. So if you don't see a bars code listed on your Schedule 1 template, download the chart of accounts for your government type and basis of accounting to see if it's listed there. If there is an error for a bars code in a specific fund, either download your chart of accounts to review the code definition and utilize the codes to fund resource. And as I mentioned, we were going to show what that resource looks like. So just a reminder, this is where you can find it. It is on the bars account export page. We're on this after the second paragraph. And then this is what it looks like. So as you can see, it is in Excel, so you can filter and sort for the code that you're looking for and see what fund types it is allowed in. And just a reminder, this won't identify what government types each code is allowed in, but it will say, is this allowed for your basis of accounting and what fund types it's allowed in. All right, I don't see any outstanding questions. We are at our 10-minute break. So sorry, it's kind of a wonky time because it's 9:47, but let's meet back here at 9:57, 10 minutes, and then we will do the second half of our training. Thank you. All right, it's 9:57. We are coming back. And we are still talking about the Schedule 1, but we are going to get into more detail. So this is when we are going to do the Schedule 1 crosswalk. And like I said, Schedule 1, this is a big component of the report. But the focus of this section is visualizing the connection between your financial statements and the Schedule 1. So in the handout email yesterday, you should have seen a GAAP handout for proprietary funds and a GAAP handout for governmental funds. If not, if you scroll up early on into the chat, we also attach them there. You can use those to walk through this or just walk through in the PowerPoint slides. But those handouts are meant for you to take and refer back to if you need assistance with filling out the Schedule 1. So basically, we're just going to walk through how to do the crosswalk from financial statements into the Schedule 1, really high level. This is an example of a crosswalk from the statement of revenue, expenses, and changes in fund net position to the Schedule 1. The image on the left of your screen is a snippet of the statement of changes for a GAAP water district. And on the right is a snippet of the Schedule 1 template, again, for a GAAP water district. So if you're following along in the handout, the red number on the statement of changes corresponds to the red number over on the Schedule 1 example. You'll notice that some of the red numbers are duplicated, which indicates amounts that need to either be consolidated or separated into further detail for reporting on the Schedule 1. So looking at the statement, you'll see the red number 1 for water sales. Then over on the Schedule 1 example, you'll also see the red number 1. You would take that $3 million amount and report it over on the Schedule 1 for water sales and services revenue. Moving down to operating expenses, I wanted to point out that depreciation and amortization lines, which have the red number 3, these will need to be consolidated and reported over on the Schedule 1 to the applicable 501 bars code. And this is for depreciation and amortization for water utilities. One good double check here to confirm the Schedule 1 accurately ties to the statement is the total operating expenses on the statement in that purple box should be the same as the total amounts reported over on the 01 example, also in that purple box. The last thing before we move on, if you recall those memorandum accounts that we were just talking about, I wanted to point out a couple of those on the Schedule 1 example as shown by those 2 red arrows. These line items are for debt and capital outlay, but you won't find that information on this statement because remember, it's required to be reported on the 01 for informational purposes only. We're still talking about proprietary funds, but let's move over to the crosswalk from the statement of net position into the Schedule 1. You will see on the Schedule 1 example, there is the series of 800 codes to use to report the government's assets, liabilities, and deferred outflows and inflows. So you'll follow the red numbers on the statement and where they correspond on the Schedule 1. So looking at the statement, you'll see 2 line items with the red number 8 for cash and cash equivalents. So those would need to be consolidated and reported to the corresponding line item on the Schedule 1. A good double check here as well is the amount on the statement for total current assets should match to the total reported to the red number 8 and 9 over on the Schedule 1. So those are just some good double checks to make sure things are getting crosswalked over correctly. So now we're going to move on to the crosswalk for governmental funds. This is basically the same concept, but the governmental crosswalk is a bit more simplified because we're not dealing with the memorandum accounts. So on the left of your screen, you'll see a snapshot of the statement of revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balances for a GAAP health district that reports as a governmental fund. Then on the right of your screen, you'll see the snippet of the Schedule 01 template. Same thing as before, the red numbers on the statement correspond to the red numbers on the Schedule 01 example. So looking at the first line item on the statement, this is for licenses and permits. Now, depending on what exactly is included in this, there may be multiple BARS codes used on the Schedule 01, but for the purposes of this training, we're going to lump it all together into non-business licenses and permits over there on the Schedule 01. Now, moving down to expenditures, depending on your specific statement, these might be at a higher level of detail than what is actually needed for the Schedule 01. So you will want to either separate or consolidate amounts so that you're reporting salaries, benefits, supplies, and services, then any debt or capital as it applies. Last thing is the governmental crosswalk from the balance sheet into the Schedule 01. Again, same concept. Each red number corresponds to the applicable line on the Schedule 01. Looking at the statement on the left, you'll see there are two number 9s, which would be consolidated, again, to report one line item on the Schedule 01. Then looking at the total liabilities with number 11 is just copied right over into the Schedule 01 as shown. So that includes our crosswalk. It's really high level, but again, you can refer back to those handouts that were provided, and that will also provide you with the crosswalk and information about memorandum accounts for the proprietary funds. And so you'll have all the information that you can take with you after the training. And on that note, I will hand it over to Christy.
Thank you, Kaylee. Let's move on to the Schedule 09, also known as the Schedule of Liabilities. As the name suggests, this is used to report local government's liabilities. Both current and non-current liabilities should be reported. When reporting debt, it is reported at face value, and only the principal amounts of the debt are reported. That means things like interest, issuance costs, premiums or discounts, etc., are not reported on the Schedule 09. Some examples of liabilities reported on the Schedule 09 are loans, bonds, pensions, environmental liabilities, lines of credit, pensions, leases, etc. When preparing the Schedule 09, it is important to utilize the instructions in the BARS manual to identify the correct ID number to report the liabilities. To find the right ID number, you'll first need to know the correct liability category to look under. We'll get into this more during the exercise when we put this concept into practice. So that moves us to our third polling question. What chapter in the BARS manual can you find the Schedule 09 instructions? The chart of accounts, budgeting, accounting, or reporting? Just a little bit more. I see a lot in reporting, which is where you will find those instructions. The Schedule 09 is a really good example of how items are split in the BARS manual. The instructions provide guidance on how to report the local government's liabilities on the annual report, which is why it's in the reporting section of the BARS manual. The actual accounting or calculation of the liabilities is found in the accounting section of the BAR's manual. Let's use pension as an example, since it affects a majority of governments. The Schedule 09 instructions provides the ID numbers to report the pension liabilities on the schedule. But the guidance on how to do the actual calculation is found in the accounting section. I'll pass it off to Kaylee to get us started with our Schedule 09 exercise.
Thank you. All right, let's get into our next exercise that is related to the Schedule 09 and will help take some of this concepts that we've learned and put them into practice. So again, redundant, but hopefully you have a separate web browser open still to the GAAP BAR's manual. If not, these are just the instructions on how to get there. But this time we are going to navigate to the reporting chapter in the SAO annual report schedule section, and then locate the Schedule 09 instructions. So go to the reporting chapter, expand that, and then you'll need to expand the SAO annual report schedules section, and then you should see liabilities with Schedule 09 in parentheses. So give everyone a second to get there. All right, and then once you are there in the Schedule 09 instructions, find the 5-digit ID number or numbers for leases and put your answer in the chat. So we're looking for those 5-digit ID numbers for leases. All right, see answers coming through. So there are two ID numbers for leases. So there's 263.56, and then there's also 263.57. So when you found the ID number 263.56, what liability category was that under? And put your answer into the chat. So the liability category that ID number 263.56 is under is the general obligation debt and liabilities. So that is the liability category. And this is when the government has pledged its full faith, credit, and taxing power to secure the debt or liability. So that means that the government would be obligated to repay the debt using all available means, including raising taxes to the extent allowable by law. Now, that's probably extremely rare. Most cases, your leases are not going to be a general obligation. Most governments are not putting that much risk into acquiring a lease. But that's not to say it can never happen. So that's why it's still available as an option. But looking at ID number 263.57, what liability category is that ID number under? So 263.57, which liability category is that under? Yes, that one is under revenue and other non-GO debt and liabilities. This is when obligations do not have a specific general obligation pledge. Also includes revenue debt, which is secured by a pledge of revenue from a particular activity, such as a water utility. So why do you think we have two different ID numbers for leases under different liability categories? And go ahead and put your reasoning of why you think that is into the chat. Yeah, so the liability categories are determined by how the government secures the debt and liability. Generally speaking, you will know if it's a general obligation pledge because it will be stated right on the loan or bond paperwork. It's a bigger deal, so that's usually not a mystery. It's usually very clear, and the government will know. But part of this exercise was to highlight the importance of first understanding the different liability categories before identifying the correct ID number. So in this case for leases, if you are scrolling through the Schedule 09 instructions, yes, you're going to see the lease ID number under general obligation first, but having that understanding of, wait, that's rare. Did I actually secure this with all available means? And does it meet that criteria? If not, look under revenue and non-GO category and then use the lease ID number there. So just making sure that you know how your government secured the debt or liability, and then identifying the correct ID number based on the correct category. So we have a scenario and then we'll have the polling question. So in this scenario, Sample County Fire District number 5 has entered into a lease agreement for the first time and will need to report a lease liability. The district has the Schedule 09 instructions already, but needs guidance on how to calculate the lease liability. So the polling question is up. So what chapter of the BARS manual can you find guidance for lease calculations? We have chart of accounts, budgeting, accounting, or reporting. Give that a couple more seconds. All right, I'll go ahead and end that poll, share the results. So in this case, you would want to go to the accounting chapter, because remember, the reporting chapter is where you'll find the Schedule 09 instructions, how to prepare the actual schedule. But if you're looking for specific accounting guidance on calculations of liabilities, that is going to be in the accounting section. And this is just a snippet of where the accounting guidance for leases can be found. As you can see, it's found under the accounting chapter and then under the liabilities section. So we have a whole page on leases and the accounting behind it. So let's do just a quick recap of the Schedule 09 exercise. Remember, the instructions on how to prepare the Schedule 09 and the prescribed ID numbers are found in the reporting chapter of the BARS manual. When determining which ID number to use to report your liabilities, first identify the correct liability category. Remember, the liability categories are based on whether the government has pledged its full faith, credit, and taxing power to secure that debt or liability. So now that we know where to find the accounting and reporting guidance, it's time to fill out the template. This is an example of the Schedule 09 template. And as you can see, we are not altering the basic format of the template because remember, it's designed to import this data into the filing system. So that means don't add or remove columns, no totals, subtotals, etc. When completing the template, you'll input the ID number as prescribed in the 09 instructions, then a description of the liability. Now, if you have filed before, you may notice that the maturity date column has been removed, which was published in the most recent BARS update. So you'll go straight to reporting the beginning balance, then additions, reductions, and ending balance for each liability reported. When inputting the amounts, report all amounts as whole numbers and no cents, because that can cause variance issues when uploading, since each line item must balance within $1. And when you report cents, once you upload, the filing system automatically rounds it up or down. And so that's where the variance issue can come in. All right. I don't see any questions. So I will hand it off to Christy.
Thank you, Kaylee. Let's move on to the Schedule 15. The Schedule 15 is used to report expenditures from awards received from state agencies. Since we are reporting expenditures, you would only report items on the Schedule 15 in the year that those expenditures were recognized, which may be different than the year you received the grant revenue. Since we are discussing award money, remember to always confirm with the state agency to see if any portion of the award is federal in origin. Federal funding always stays federal funding, and there are instructions on how to report any mix of state and federal funding in the Schedule 15 and 16 instructions. It is also common for federal agencies to issue awards through state agencies or even local governments. So it's important to review those contracts and agreements to confirm if any portion originated from a federal source. This is generally identified by an ALN, which stands for Assistance Listing Number. So let's do an exercise to put those concepts into practice. In 2025, Sample County was approved for a grant from the State Department of Transportation in the amount of $25,000 for rebuilding roads. In 2025, the county spent $50,000 on this project. They will be reimbursed in 2026. Our first question is, what year would the county report a Schedule 15? Give everyone a little bit to answer that question. Perfect. I'm seeing a lot of 2025s, which is the correct answer. Remember, the Schedule 15 is dependent on when the expenditure happens, not the revenue or reimbursement. Our second question, what amount would be reported on the Schedule 15? Put your answer in the chat. I'm seeing a lot of 25,000, which is the correct answer. So it'd only be the 25,000 out of that 50,000 because the award from the State Department of Transportation is only for that $25,000. So that Schedule 15 expenditure should be only up to the award amount, which in this case is $25,000. So essentially, while the county spent $50,000, 25 of it is really the Department of Transportation's, which is reported on the Schedule 15. And the other $25,000 is the county's own money that they are going to not be reimbursed for. And I know sometimes there's questions on this, so just pause for a second to see. Not seeing any. Let's move on to the template. Here is the Schedule 15 template, and we'll talk about what you'll need to fill this out. First, you'll need the 7-digit bars code for the state agency, which can be found in the chart of accounts. Then the program title. This is the award program, which usually comes from the state agency you receive the award from. Then you'll input the identification number. This is usually an identifier assigned by the awarding agency to identify the program, but it's not always included. So if you don't see it on the paperwork, input NA for not applicable. Lastly, input the amount. Remember, this is only the amount of the award that was spent in the reporting year. The Schedule 16 is similar to the Schedule 15, but now we're talking about federal awards. The Schedule 16, also referred to as the CFA, is used to report expenditures from awards received directly or indirectly from federal agencies. This is important to remember. It is only reporting the expenditures that are or will be covered by the federal award. Just like the Schedule 15, it is reported in the year that the expenditures occurred. Direct federal awards are received directly from the federal agency, and indirect federal awards are received indirectly as a pass-through from a third party, such as the state agency, local government, etc. It is very important to prepare the schedule carefully to ensure that it is accurate and complete. There are strict reporting requirements and other criteria that goes into the schedule due to audit requirements. So let's do an exercise. In 2025, the City of Sample received an advanced federal grant in the amount of $100,000. This was not a reimbursement grant, so the city must determine how it will be spent. In 2026, the city spent $50,000 to help restore buildings from flood damage. What year would the city report a Schedule 16? I'm seeing a lot of 2026s, which is correct. That is the year in which the expenditures happened. So they would report a Schedule 16 in 2026. What amount would be reported on the Schedule 16? Put your answers in chat. I'm seeing a lot of 50,000, which is correct. The city spent that 50,000. It is under the amount of the federal grant. Therefore, they'd report the full amount in this case. So let's look at the Schedule 16 template. When it comes to completing the Schedule 16 template, just like any other template, it is important to not adjust the prescribed format. Do not add any additional columns, totals, subtotals, etc. Remember, the templates are just used to import the data into the online binding system. You'll start with inputting the 5-digit ALN in column A. Then in column B, this is where you indicate yes if the program was related to COVID-19. If it wasn't, you can leave this field blank. Then column C and D can actually be left blank because once you upload the template into the binding system, these will get auto-populated based on the ALN. Then if the award was received indirectly by a third party, you'll input the pass-through agency name into column E. If the award was received directly, this field is to be left blank. It is important to make sure that this field is completely blank for direct awards, because even inputting NA or none will trigger the binding system to think it is an indirect award. The other award ID number is required for all indirect awards. So if you report a pass-through agency, you'll be required to include the other award ID number. For direct awards, this field is optional and can be left blank. Now we're on to column G. If the award is research and development, also known as R&D, input yes. Otherwise, leave this column blank. Then column H is when you'll input the total federal awards expended. I wanted to make sure I draw your attention to column I. Of the total amount of federal awards expended, report how much of that was passed on to subrecipients. The thing I wanted to point out is this column is numeric values only. So if no amount was passed on to subrecipients, leave it blank. Lastly is the footnote reference. If applicable, enter the reference number that corresponds with the notes to the schedule of expenditures of federal awards. Which moves us on to the secondary component of the Schedule 16. This is required as part of the annual report, which is the notes to the CFA. This is a separate form than the Schedule 16 template and attached separately within the annual filing system. When completing the notes to the CFA, is there a template for the CFA notes on the BAR's reporting templates page? Put your answer in chat. I'm seeing a lot of yeses, but in this case, for the notes to the CFA, there is no template document on the BAR's reporting templates page. To complete the notes to the CFA, you'll copy the template directly from the Schedule 16 instructions and the BAR's manual into a Word file, then make the necessary edits. So there's no template for the notes. There is a template for the actual CFA. Here is a snippet of what the template looks like within the Schedule 16 instructions in the BAR's manual. So you'll copy this information into a Word file to complete the notes and attach it to your annual report. Let's move on to our fifth polling question. For Schedule 15 and 16, do you report revenues or expenditures? Just a bit more here. All right. I'm seeing a lot of expenditures, which is correct. Remember, both the Schedule 15 and 16 are schedules of expenditures. So we only report our expenditures, not our revenue in connection with those awards. So the last component of the annual report is your government's financial reporting package. The SAO annual report schedules we covered already are required in addition to the GASB requirements because the SAO schedules are required as part of RCW 4309-230. Essentially, this means even if the schedule of liabilities is included in your financial reporting package, it is still required to complete the SAO prescribed Schedule 09. We work to ensure that the SAO legal reporting requirements for local governments in Washington are consistent with the national standards of financial reporting prescribed by the GASB. These requirements include the basic financial statements, including notes to the financial statements, the required supplementary information, including the MD&A, which stands for Management Discussion and Analysis, and the supplemental schedules. And with that, we are through all the annual report components. And on to any questions. I'm not seeing any open questions right now. So I'll pass it on to Kaylee for our training and resources.
Thank you. So we've made it to our last agenda item. So we'll wrap up today's training with some additional training and resources. that are available to you all to help during the filing process. So if you have filed an annual report before, have you ever used the new virtual assistant feature in the filing system? And this is our last polling question. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close the poll, share the results. So a lot of you said no, and then just a small portion of you said yes. So we are going to talk about what that is. So if you filed before, you may remember last year we implemented a brand new chat feature in the filing system, and it was actually a huge success in its first year. We received a lot of positive feedback from local governments that it was helpful, and that is, of course, what we love to hear. So this chat feature is found directly in the filing system after you log in, and there is the virtual chat assistant that will greet you and provide guidance and resources for common issues like templates, training, etc. You can also type in the topic you're hoping to get help on, such as pensions or compensated absences or leases. And the virtual chat assistant will provide you with links to available resources on those topics. And if you're not able to get the help that you need, there is an option to request to chat with a filing specialist. This is only available during peak filing times, and that's going to be April and May. And that's Monday through Friday, about 9 to 3. And when that is available, you can request a chat with one of us in real time, similar to an instant message service. And we can help answer your questions or at least get you pointed in the right direction. But the virtual chat assistant is available all year, 24/7. So that is just a nice place to get some help, resources, frequently asked questions, things like that when staff is not available. So let's talk about the BARS and annual report filing FAQs page, which can be found under the BARS and annual filing tab on our homepage. There are some great resources and guidance on this page, but I wanted to specifically focus on these two, the handbook and the error guide. These are both PDF documents that get updated each year and can be used to help you through the filing process. We'll take a look at what each of these resources entail and what they look like. Starting with the annual filing handbook, this is a comprehensive guide that walks you through the entire filing system and how to import these various components. This is what you'll find inside the handbook. As you can see, there are written instructions for each step, plus screenshots and arrows to help point you in the right direction. This is a really great resource if you're someone that prefers to go at their own pace, have written instructions that you can refer back to, and you can just have this up as you are filing your report. Now let's talk about the error guide. This is also a great resource to have up as you're filing your report, but this guide is focused on understanding what errors you may see in the filing system and how to correct them. This is what you'll see in the error guide. We have a description of what each error means and tips on how to resolve them. We also include direct links to sections in the BARS manual that provides even more guidance on that particular topic. So we want to make sure that you understand why something is an error, what is the background, and then how can you fix it. Now we're going to jump over to our training and workshops page because we have some great resources here as well. And this is everything filing and other BARS related topics. So this houses all of our training, our recorded training, and all in one section. So this is going to be found under e-learning's library. This is where you'll find all of our recorded trainings. We break it up into topics like BARS and annual filing, special bars topics, and that's just specific components. But everything that we record and publish is found here. So you can find things like a recorded training on the bars update. And then some of our newest training, this is the how to navigate the annual filing system. So this recorded training is focused more on just the filing system and how to import all of the components that we talked about today. We, of course, have to finish out our annual report training with a reminder of the deadline. For calendar year-end governments, your annual report is due by Saturday, May 30th. Please write that down, put it on your calendar, and then pretend the deadline is actually Friday, May 29th, because nobody wants to be filing their report on a weekend. But also a reminder that since the deadline does fall on a weekend, SAO will not have support staff available to assist with filing questions. So we're trying to make sure everyone is aware of what the staffing availability will be. And we want to make sure we remind governments to start their reports early and allow plenty of time to ask questions and get help if needed. And how to reach us. We already talked about the chat feature that is in there, but we also have our annual filing support inbox. This is lgcsfeedback@sao.wa.gov. This is the best place to email, ask questions of all things annual report related. For the more technical bars, accounting and reporting questions, we would refer you to the help desk. This is just so that you can connect with a specialist on that topic. But both options are great. Either way, we'll make sure we get you pointed in the right direction. So that concludes our training for this morning. Thank you everyone for attending and participating in the exercises. We really appreciate it. Just a reminder that once the webinar officially ends, there will be a pop-up window with the survey. Just 2 questions. What is something that went well? If there's anything that we can improve on for next time, please let us know. We really do appreciate you taking the time to give us feedback. So thank you and hope everyone has a good rest of your day.
Recording.